one of the things we use, not just in our fields activities, but also in the community science. And one of the things we make accessible to the broader public on our website is these um, Bumble Bee ID cards. This one specifically for the bumblebees of South Central Ontario. Not all species are represented on here, but the ones that you're most likely to encounter and some of the ones that are kind of significant are going to be on here. And when we're using this, you'll see it kind of breaks the bees down into these color groups. So there's a color grouping for bees that are mostly yellow, bees that are showing orange bands or orange bottoms, bees that have black bottoms, and bees that have yellow bands on their abdomen, and also cuckoo bees. So when we're looking at bees and we're trying to ID them, again, it's being reflected in this card. The things that we're looking for mostly are the color pattern shown on the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. The thorax being that middle part of their body where the wings and the legs attach, and the abdomen being that long part extending at the back of the body, which is basically the bee's bum. And if you're confused at all, very handily, we have all of this on the back side of these cards. So just the overall bee morphology, all of these different segments that I just mentioned, the abdomen being broken down into 6 segments, and we also have very interestingly some distinctions between males and females. So male and female bumblebees have some consistent morphological differences. Females have pollen baskets, as you can see in this diagram. That triangle part that's highlighted there on the mid part of the hind leg, that triangle shape is indicative of a corbicula or a pollen basket, and that is where female bees, so queens or workers, will pack pollen into to bring back to their nest and provision the rest of the colony. We also see the females have 6 segments on the abdomen, the last one being a stinger, and it also shows their antenna. Males, conversely, have no pollen basket, and this is what the diagram is showing, just that kind of smooth, rounded mid part of the hind leg where you would see that triangle on a female. We also see the abdomen has 7 segments, um, as opposed to the 6 that we see on a female. And we also see the 2 antenna differences here. It's just another kind of similar to the abdomen. The males have an extra segment on their antenna. Really hard to count these. It just makes them look a little bit longer. So female antennas, they have a kink and they kind of jut out after that. Male antennas, they also have that kink, but then they kind of hoop down because they're a little bit longer. So you'll see them kind of extend a little bit farther out, and the weight kind of brings the end of their antenna down in almost like a swoosh shape. So when we're looking at our ID card, one thing I haven't touched on yet is coarse grouping of cuckoos, and that's because they don't necessarily follow the same color traits, though they can share some. They're combines in this one grouping just of the fact that they are cuckoos. So cuckoos are social parasites. Their females aren't queens in the same way we understand queens of other bumblebee species. We typically just describe them as having reproductive females and reproductive males. And the reason why we don't call them queens is because they actually don't have their own worker caste. The females don't make their own workers. What they do is they infiltrate an existing colony of a host species, and then they oust the queen and use the queen's workers to raise her own females and males. Cuckoos are a little bit confusing because they kind of muddy the differences between males and females. They don't necessarily follow the same female patterns that you would typically associate, mostly the pollen basket. So they still have 6 segments on their abdomen, they still have the same number of segments on their antenna, but they don't have a pollen basket. And that's because they don't need to carry their own pollen to provision their own colonies and raise their own workers, because they kind of uh, use the infiltrated colonies worker force to do that for them. When we take a look at a bee, we can look at its kind of coarse color patterns and try and fit it into one of these categories. This bee here, if I were to just look at it at a single glance, I see its abdomen is mostly black. It's black at the bottom, so I can place it in a black bottom grouping. And then from there, I can look at the other fine differences or fine characteristics on the head, thorax, and abdomen to try and rule out any other lookalikes and hopefully land on a positive ID. So in this case, I see yellow thorax with some black hairs between the wings, kind of maybe intermixed with some yellow, it looks like. That definitely rules out the perplexing bumblebee, the confusing bumblebee, because this species has no pattern between the wings. It's just all yellow hairs. So the fact that there are black hairs between the wings, we can immediately rule this one out. And on the abdomen, I see that the first segment is yellow and the following segments are all black. And that really, I mean, that one trait really does most of the work for us. As we see on this ID card, all of the bees here, except for one, have something going on T2. The half black has a band of yellow. The brown belted has a crescent of brown on the second segment. The two spotted has two spots. And the rusty patch has that namesake rusty patch with some yellow at the bottom of it. But all of these different things are happening on the second segment. The fact that there is no yellow or no pattern at all in the second segment is just black. Immediately we can land on the common eastern as our ID. And we could do that with any other species we encounter. Again, just taking a coarse glance at it and placing it in one of these color patterns, and then using the differences on the head, thorax, and abdomen to rule out the lookalikes potentially that are also in that same grouping. The last thing on our ID card here, this is one of my favorite parts about them, is just submission instructions to Bumble Bee Watch. So it is a citizen science platform, kind of like a naturalist or other platforms like that. If you want to contribute to Bumble Bee Watch, you make your account, go out into the wild, in your garden, wherever you might find bees, and take a photograph of the bees you find. And you can hop back onto your profile and upload them onto the platform. And there's a link and instructions to do so on these ID cards too to make it a little bit more seamless. And that's the through and through of our ID cards.